So, Mr. Pringle, we heard today here in Luxembourg at the Court of Justice, European Court of Justice, your arguments against the ESM, the European Bailout Fund. You basically said, your attorney said that the ESM violates the European law itself. Then we heard arguments from, in total it's more than a dozen representatives of member nations, the European Parliament, the European Union, etc. And it's not over yet, we are in a break. But can you tell me already if you found convincing arguments from your counterparts?
I suppose in a word, no. It's very interesting listening to the submissions from the other member states. Obviously, they were all party to the decision that established the ESM, so they have to defend their position. It's interesting what they haven't addressed rather than what they have addressed. They have, in none of the submissions have they addressed how the treaties could actually have been amended to make this possible, and I always have argued that that could have been done. Obviously, they took a decision for whatever reason not to do that, and to establish this ESM outside the control of the Union. And it's interesting, I find, that nobody has addressed any of those, what could have been done. They say that this is the only option they had, which we have always argued that they had others.
Yes, we heard also some arguments which went into political contents, like, for example, the German representatives, but also other representatives. He said that we must put this discussion in context, so he made it political. And he said basically that if the ESM is if there are doubts casted on the legality of the ESM, this would unleash the markets, and this would be the doom of the euro and of Europe. Do you think this is a scare tactic?
Well, obviously, because the decision to establish this ESM was taken in October 2010, over 2 years ago at this stage, and we have seen how the so-called markets have reacted all during that period. So we couldn't have had any more instability than we have had since they made this decision. So I think that it's very important that this court leaves politics at the door, and the court considers the treaties as being the founding body of the Union and looks only at those purposes. And I think it is wrong that politics should be brought into it, and looking at the wider political situation and making the arguments before the court.
I was also struck by the arguments, by the speech of the British representative, because the British are not in the euro, but they are in the European Union. And apparently his speech, the speech of the British, demonstrated that it's not about the euro, otherwise the British would not care, they would be indifferent. Or how do you characterize that role?
Yeah, I suppose when you look at the City of London and the financial services there, Britain, while they're not a member of the Eurozone, they are very closely linked to the Eurozone, and they would see the survival of the Eurozone and the protection of the euro as being very important to their own interests as well. And for that reason, I presume that they went along with the amendment to Article 136 because it suited their interests.
So let's, with this, take a step back from the discussion on legality, and let's go into politics and into the economy. I mean, this raises the issue, what is the ESM for? Is it for the euro, for the states, or is it for the banks, to save the banks?
Well, I think it's obvious and that it is for the banks, and it is for making the Irish bailout a bailout right across Europe, where citizens become responsible for the banking debts, debts that they are not responsible for accruing, but citizens will be responsible for it in the future. The ESM is intended to lend money to sovereign states who will use that money to recapitalise the banks, and the citizens of those states are responsible for the repayment of that money. So it is an Irish bailout for Europe.
Yes, your country, Ireland, has been victimized in the first place because in Euroland, it's not allowed to let banks fail. So the taxpayers to come in and bail out the banks. If we had in the first place a strict division like it's being discussed now between commercial banks, deposit banks which are protected by government, and commercial banks, investment banks who speculate, this would not have been the case. So are you in favor of this now?
Yeah, this wouldn't have been the case if we had had effective regulation. We wouldn't have had the situation either. If the German, French and English banks had acted responsibly in their lending to Irish banks, we wouldn't be in this situation either. So it is not the Irish problem is not the creation of Ireland solely, and it is a problem of regulation and the neoliberal politics and market capitalism that has continued for the last number of years. And I think that we have to make banks responsible and for their own debts. At this stage in Ireland, we have given over 80 billion euros to our banks. We will continue to pay for the next 30 years, possibly another 50 billion euros for the saving of Anglo-Irish Bank, and all of this to protect the euro. And the Irish people are made responsible for all that debt. And even last week, we paid 508 million euros into the ESM, where Germany and other countries are saying it can't sort out retrospectively our problems. So it shows that the intention is to make citizens responsible for the banking system and not the banks themselves.
Now, the unresolved financial crisis and the deepening economic crisis, because the world is now going again into a recession, and there are big dark clouds on the horizon. But there are also big dark clouds on the political horizon in the world in terms of increasing conflicts. Do you see a connection between this? Is there a danger that we are going towards a general conflict if the world economic and financial crisis is not solved?
That danger is there, and in times of uncertainty, it leads to further uncertainty. I think that the steps that have been taken and the austerity right across the Eurozone and across the world that has been imposed on citizens is fueling that crisis and making it even worse. In the Irish situation, the government tells us that we can take money out of the economy and expect the economy to grow, and we have seen over the last 4 years that can't happen. And if you do that on a continent-wide basis, it leads to a situation where now we have in Ireland 1 in 10 people cannot afford to feed themselves, where we have 80,000 people a year leaving the country to go to other countries in search of work, which, as the economic downturn across the world takes hold, will mean that they will have nowhere to go, and that will create further potential for conflict, where what we should have is governments taking responsibility for their citizens rather than their banks, and dealing with the issues, and the solution to debt is not to add more debt to it.
Now, this legal procedure will resume in about 1.5 hours. And sometimes in the future, this court will give a verdict, a statement. What happens? What do you think if the court supports the arguments of the European Union and of the governments? Do we have a tyranny in that case?
Well, I don't like to think about what will happen if they do. I think that it will be a very bad day for democracy across Europe and for citizens. It will mean that the intergovernmental way that the decisions are being made now will be made to be the future. So we will see large countries and strong economic countries will dominate and will force their will on other countries, which I think will be a very bad thing for the Union.
Okay, this is a big challenge for this court. Thank you, Mr. Pringle.
Thank you very much.